Hey guys, Andrew Masters here with Studio Time. Welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the control panel, which is the software that is attached to all of the Antelope Audio Interfaces. Now, specifically what I want to do is make sort of an overview for anyone who is new to the Antelope Audio line of interfaces and therefore control panel software. I'll preface this with saying previously I've used Focusrite interface, I've used Avid interfaces, I've used Lynx interfaces, I had the Apollos, and then I also have used the Apogee Symphony interfaces. So I'm familiar with the software that comes with all of these different products, as well as the feature sets and sort of what you're able to do with each one of them. I recently made a video on the Galaxy 32, breaking down all of the features that the Galaxy 32 has, and not necessarily that any one of those particular features were unique to the interface, but the fact that all of the features come with one interface. And specifically, if you're working with these pro audio, higher end audio interfaces that have higher price points, then when you start to look at the features that come with them, you start to notice a big giant gap between some of the other products that I mentioned before and then these Galaxy interfaces, or even the Orion 32 interface. So since the Galaxy 32 that I have has all of those features that solve all of the little boxes that I want for how I want to use my studio for both recording, for writing, for production, for mixing, for being able to do all of the needs that I want for my specific workflow and have an excessive number of inputs and outputs. Now, as I mentioned, this Galaxy has not just one or two or three of some of those features that the other interfaces has, it has all of those features that I like from all the other interfaces put in one, and it's bundled at a price point of $5,900. Some of you pointed out, wow, $6,000. It better have a lot. Sure, $6,000 can seem like a lot if you're looking at smaller interfaces, but when you're looking at any interface that has 32 analog inputs built into the interface alone, that's already more competitively priced than anything else on the market. But on top of that, you have all of the other inputs, Pro Tools HDX inputs, MADI inputs, Dante inputs, giving you a total of 64 I/O that you're going to be able to use going into your DAW. Not to mention you can connect 32 channels of any of those digital inputs plus the ADAT plus your analog inputs. You can have far over 500 inputs, but going into your DAW, it's going to be 64 I/O. Okay, so let's bring it back to the software. I got the Galaxy 32. The thing I was most unfamiliar with and nervous about was the control panel software that pairs with the interface. Part of the reason I was nervous was the routing window that I had seen before was a different layout than anything I had used before. So it was just the fact that it was different had me a little bit concerned. However, a good friend of mine, Fady, who actually told me about these interfaces and told me how it can do all of the things that I want to do with it, I called him and it took 1 second for him to explain to me how to use the routing window, and then I very quickly learned the rest of the features on the control panel, which make using the interface and I/O, mixers, and Synergy Core effects, signal processing, all of the other features, it's far more simple than you might think at a first glance. If you're unfamiliar with using software with your interface, the software, in this case it's called Control Panel, is going to provide access to all of the settings and functions that control your interface. Some of these include the settings, the signal routing, the different mixers that are involved, the Synergy Core effects, which is like their plugins that they have that you can use to record through or to monitor through, their metering, and then you can have different presets for how you have your interface set up. And all of this is controlled inside of the control panel. I want to make this video so you can get comfortable with the control panel so you can get the most out of your interface. Okay, let's jump into it. Okay, so this is our control panel window here. Now, there's a bunch of different views on this, right? So we're gonna have potentially a handful of different ways or things you see when you pull up your control panel. So the main view that I'll show you here is generally this. Now, at the top here, we have what's called the function strip. This is gonna be your on and standby, your clock source. This will show you if you have any external sync, and then the sample rate you're set to. Down underneath this, you have a couple different options to change your view here. This is the main monitoring tab, so you can see your outputs here, depending on what your speaker arrangement is set up to, your levels, dim monitoring controls, typical stuff right here. You can bypass if you're using some of these, let's call them more advanced features. Over here on the right, we have our session tab, which is, this is the side of the control panel where you can actually save presets of your control panel setup. This is very useful if you have a setup like mine, where I have hardware inserts that are always patched, where I have instruments that are always set up with mics always on them, when I have synths that are right next to me that are always routed to the same place, headphone mixes which are generally routed the same way. I can save that right here in the software presets under, you can have, 5 different presets that you can save here. You just hit the little save button, you select what you're going to save, and then you hit assign. So I've already got mine set up here. Now next to our session tab, we have an info tab. This is going to be useful if you just want to dig into the manuals on some of the different features, control panel routing effects, and then just extra help here if you ever need tech support. You want the online manual. To the left of the monitoring tab, we have our ADAT tab, which has some trims on it. We have our SPDIF tab. I generally keep mine right on the monitoring. And then underneath this strip here, we have a handful of other different tabs that we can view. Now, the main one that generally is on my control panel is the routing. And this is essentially a digital controlled patch bay. So this is where all of the connections to your audio interface are going to visually be seen, and where you can actually reroute stuff digitally. It's actually super cool. Now, the thing that got me, 2 things. I didn't love the colors. Immediately when I opened it, I was like, wow, these colors are awful. If that's something that hits you, I will put your mind at ease. You can right click on the section and actually change the color. So I've gone through and I've tamed them a little bit. It's an interesting balance, just like Pro Tools or Logic when you're labeling your tracks. You kind of want something that's easy on the eyes, but you also want to be able to find stuff fast. So we've got our 2 windows here in the routing section. You got our inputs, which is where all of your input connections are going to be available for you, one, to see, but also to route. And underneath it, you have all of your outputs here. So as you can see in the inputs, we have our line ins, we have our DAW outs, we have our MADI ins, our ADAT ins, mix 1, 2, and 3. Just above these different paths, you can see there's like little tabs that are essentially show and hide of your connections that you have. So you can see we have Dante here. I'm not using any Dante, so I don't keep these visible. And I like that you can show and hide them so you don't have to look at all this. So I will hide the connections that I'm not using just to keep it simple. Now, if I put all of these in, you can see just how many different ways you can connect to this interface. It is absolutely insane. These are all the different connections you can have. Now, you can keep all of the connections on your interface connected all the time, and then just select which ones you are actually using. So I'm going to, again, hide these tabs that I am not using. So the way I have things set up in here is I have line ins are my analog inputs 1 through 32, and then we have our DAW outputs underneath that. Then we have our MADI in. So I have expanded the inputs of my Galaxy 32. So I actually have 64 analog inputs. So I'm using all 32, and then the MADI is going to another unit, the Ferrofish. So all of these inputs and outputs for MADI show up right here. MADI in 1 through 32, 33 to 64. Same thing here. Now, as an example, I'm going to show you how I route things to the headphones. Now, for my headphone system here, I have the Behringer P16s, which are 16-channel line mixers, and they're Ethernet, so they're all over the place. Because I like to keep all the inputs in my studio live all the time, here's how I have set up my workflow, and this is really, really cool. Big selling point for me. I have drums, full drum kit in the other room, mic'd up. For the headphones, I am just taking a stereo send for all the drums, and that's showing up on a stereo channel on my mixers. To be able to control that, what I have done is I've routed my drums, which I believe are 1 through, let's say, 14 right? So if I select 1 through 14 on my line ins, actually I think it's 3 through 14, right? So 3 through 14 are my drum inputs. Now, when I select these on line inputs, you can see the different places that they're being routed. You can see the selection reflected in my output tab down here under DAW in, as well as mix 3 in. So mix 3 is going to be over here in our mixer tab. These are essentially digital submixers. This is a big selling point for me. This is a feature that actually the Apogee Symphony had, but it was limited in the sense that you did not get like a full mixer window like this. It was a very small, it almost felt like an aux send. It was very difficult to use and see and adjust. Now with the mixer tab, you have access to all 4 of your mixers, and you have a full mixer here. Look, I mean, it's huge, and you can do stereo link, mute, solo, pans, and then you have your levels and you have a master level. So I have all of my drums, again, which are 3 through 14, routed to mixer 3. So this is like my drum submix. So when I'm sitting at the drums, I have this whole mixer dialed in exactly how I like to hear the drums when I am tracking. So my inputs here are all dialed in, blended, panned, how I like them. Now, as an example to show you how to route that submix to the headphones, I have 1 through 8 of my headphone mixers connected via ADAT. So I'm going to take my mix 3 out. As you can see here, we have mix 1, 2, and 3 out, 1 and 2, and you just select them, click, and drag it where you want it to go. So you can see right now, I'm going to drag it to ADAT out on channels 3 and 4. So that way, on my headphone mixer on channels 3 and 4, I have the whole stereo submix of mixer 3. And if I want to change anything, I can change it right here in the mixer 3 tab. That is essentially how you route anything within this routing window. So same thing for my line inputs. If I want to route them to my DAW inputs, you can do them 1 through 32. Just click and drag right down to DAW in 1 through 32, or into another mixer or wherever you want to go. Another cool thing about this routing window is you can route anything anywhere. And again, because it's digital, you don't have to actually patch anything. So I have my ADAT submixes here, 1 through 8. 1 and 2 are our piano. We have a piano mic'd over here. 3 and 4 is the drum submix. 5 and 6 is the keys. Now I mentioned this before, when you select an input or an output in this routing window, it shows you every instance that you have that routed. So if I hit line in 1, you can see that's routed to DAW input 1, it's routed to ADAT output 5, and then it's on mix 1 in. This is basically a carbon copy here. And then it's on mix 3 in 1. So if I can go to, let's say, mix 1 out, that is being routed to line out 1, 2. So again, you can see where you have things routed by simply just selecting them, which is very, very helpful in a window like this. But it's just as simple as just clicking and dragging it where you want to go. And that it's not any more complicated than that. I love it. So that on the whole is the routing window and how to use it. The mixer windows, again, as I mentioned, there are 4 different mixers on here. On mixer 1, you have this reverb from their AFX line that is just built into it, and you actually have these sends, so you can send anything you want and get a little bit of reverb on your mixer 1. So here's one little bonus thing that is a big selling point for me that I'm using. I have a monitor switcher here, and there are 4 inputs on it. My first input is the Antelope monitor out left and right. So this is just interface outputs 1 and 2, right? And then that is for if I'm doing mixing and I am sticking in the DAW and I'm not needing to hear anything direct monitor. On my second input, I have routed mixer 1 to my second input. So I essentially created a copy of my interface outputs 1 and 2 to go on my second input. And then I have all of these other channels here, I believe a total of 32 channels that you can use in this mixer to be able to do direct monitoring. So for example, if I want to hear my synths, I can unmute them and I can simply touch my synth and you can hear it. Same thing on this synth. They're all routed to the same place so I can hear it in real time. Now, this is the same setup for the synths, for bass DI, for bass amp, for guitar amps, for the piano. I can literally monitor the mics on the piano live through my speakers because they're routed right here. So I can solo these and just listen to the piano. Whatever we're doing, if I'm getting sounds, I can actually monitor it just as you would if you were using a recording console and you just bust it to the mix bus so that it comes out of the speakers. I'm using Mixer 1 in the same fashion. And because it has the AFX reverb on it, I can do a little send to it just to be able to monitor with a little extra sauce. Now, using Mixer 1 for direct monitoring means there is no latency. So when we're tracking, I flip over to Mixer 1 on my speakers. We can hear everything sitting right at the desk through the speakers, whether it's live drums, vocals, acoustic, pick your instrument. We hear it live with no latency. And then right here on 1 and 2 is our DAW out 1 and 2. So if we're recording to some background tracks or something like that, we can control the balance between the playback and what we're hearing live. I also have the click routed out DAW output 5, and I can individually control that again, so there is no latency while we're recording, which is absolutely fantastic. But when I jump back into mix mode, we flip over to the interface outputs 1 and 2. That way I can hear all of my hardware inserts and my mix bus hardware inserts with no problem. So after the mixer, you can see we have a handful of other tabs here. We have our AFX tabs, we have our mic emulation tab, surround, HDX, trims, and then you have your meters tabs. So all of these are going to be potentially useful at some point if you need to adjust trims, your surround, if you're doing a surround setup. Surround tab is going to be super useful for setting up whatever speaker setup that you have, and if you need to adjust the EQ on whichever speaker that you have for your room correction, this is a pretty powerful feature. I'm just using 2.0 because I'm awesome. Mic emulations, they have their own virtual microphones that you can use their software with. And then the AFX tab is for their own plugins that you can add in as effects. For example, right here, you can add this in. Now I'm gonna bring a friend of mine in to help. I have my friend Fady here, who is the technology wizard, especially when it comes to the pro audio realm and audio interfaces, routing, connecting everything. He has been the person who enlightened me about the Antelope Audio Galaxy. I was previously using the Apogee Symphony, struggling to get the features that I wanted out of the interface, and Fady told me about the Galaxy and then told me about all of the routing possibilities that allow me to do all of the insane things that I want to do here in my studio. So anyway, thank you, Fady, for helping me out and explaining some of the Synergy Core AFX features, and then maybe we'll touch on the like Atmos and routing for extra speakers for anyone who might be interested in that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be able to do this with you.
Also, Fady has his own YouTube channel where he actually goes in depth on a lot of these different topics, from everything from reviewing the interface to, have you done a video on the control panel?
I've done one, yes.
Okay.
But it's like an hour in-depth details,
Yeah.
fine-tuning everything.
Deep dive. Now, this won't be so much of a deep dive as more of just like an introduction into the AFX, how to use it, how, like, just explain to me as a layman here. I just got my Galaxy and I've got my vocal coming in my situation, it's on channel 16. We can call it whatever you have on yours, on my line input. And I want to experiment and test out using maybe some vocal processing on the input for the singer to hear in their headphones. How would you even go about that? And is there any anything noteworthy about how you even set this up?
Yes, because a lot of studio owners, they're coming from the background of the Apollo, which any audio processing, it works as an audio insert, which
Yes.
it goes on the actual channel, and then you get to choose, you either monitor only or you monitor and record through it. The Galaxy works a little bit different, or all of the Antelope, actually, AFX work different. They are more like a console where you have an effect channel, and I send the audio to the effect channel and bring it back.
Got it.
Which has pros and cons. The con, it feels like a little bit more work. It's not a drag and drop. I have to grab one of my effects channel, put an EQ or compressor or something on it, and I have to route audio to it and receive audio back. But the advantage of this is that when I bring back the audio back, I now have both audios. I have the dry, unprocessed signal. I also have the fully processed signal, and I get to choose which one to record or record both at the same time. I also get to choose as a recording engineer in this situation. So you can hear only the dry signal and send to the headphone mix to the artist the wet signal, so then you're making better judgments according to the dry signal. So having like a double signal, it comes in handy as well for being able to record both or record one or send different mixes to different rooms. So I like that feature. It feels like a little bit more work, but that's the advantage of it.
Okay, so I had just talked about the routing window of the control panel and how you can essentially drag your inputs to the outputs and set up however you want to have things routed. And what's great is you can actually route them to multiple places, and you can click and see exactly where all of those places are. So for the AFX is just the term for, their plugins, right? It's AFX is kind of like DSP. Yes, we're both coming from the Apollo world, so this is
which they don't
translating.
use DSP. They use a different technology in it.
Yeah. Which is
but
why
it's the
why they
same
call it
idea.
that. So what we can see down in the routing windows and the input and the output are the AFX ins and outs. So from what I'm understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I want to use some effects on a vocal track for the singer to actually hear in their headphone mix, I'm going to route essentially like a bus. Now, I just want to be clear on this, because let's say on a console workflow, you have auxes and then you have buses. And if you're not familiar with working on consoles, then those can kind of be blurry. But on a console, the bus is at the top where you press a button and it sends a duplicate of that signal to another channel. That's really what we're doing here, right? So we're sending, let's say my dry vocal signal, busing it to an effects channel and then processing it there. And then I can take that and I can just send it to the singer's headphones. So sitting at my desk, I'm still hearing the raw vocal coming in, and they're hearing the processed vocal, maybe some reverb or tune or whatever.
As well as that signal, you're choosing where it's being recorded in your DAW.
Right.
So same principle, you will take the dry signal if you want to record it, so you would assign it to one of your DAW inputs, and you will take the process signal and assign it to another one of your DAW inputs if you want to record both at the same time.
Okay, and then that's another little bonus of having two separate signals, is that you can actually record both at the same time, which is something you can't do with, let's say, an Apollo.
Yeah, it's either monitor or record. But even when you monitor, the problem as an engineer, you still have to hear that processed signal monitor.
Exactly.
Which was a problem for me. Is like, you got a vocalist, I want it so bright, and you crank the EQ because they like it this way while they're tracking, but I can't make judgments now based on if this is a good take or not.
Yep. Okay, so let's set up a track if we can here. What's the process look like? We're in the control panel here. We're in the routing window. Where do we go? What do we do?
Here's my control panel. And then I have synth bass. So I'm going to go to my inputs. You can see the inputs right now.
Oh yeah, 27, 28, boom.
So now I will go to the routing, and then here's 27 and 28.
Yep.
Now I'm going to take those and I'm going to send them to the AFX input, and I'm going to just choose channel 1 and 2 right now on my AFX. So these are going to AFX channel 1 and 2. Now on the top tab up here, I will go to my AFX. I'm going to stereo link 1 and 2 since it's a stereo channel. You can already see right there, it's pulled the name of what's being plugged to it, which is channel 27 PD, which is my poly D left and poly D right.
Okay.
And now I can just add any effects to it. So let's say I want to add an EQ, and then I want to add another EQ, and then I want to add a compressor. And I believe you can have up to 8 per channel.
Okay, so this is, I want to mention this. This is interesting. When you add inserts, you can actually see the inserts and adjust them instead of just like a channel strip, if you will.
No, they're independent, and they also go in the order of how they've been inserted.
That's cool.
So like right now I'm going the Pultec 1A first, and then the mid Pultec second, and then my 1176 is third. And you can change their order. Here you go, I dragged and dropped.
Yep.
Change how the order of being, and then you can bypass a specific one, turn it on and off.
Nice.
And then you can have up to 8.
Wow.
Now, if I play, you'll see the signal is going through the channels right now. Just compress this a little bit more so we can see the reduction on it. Here you go.
Oh, yeah.
So this is now a fully compressed signal. We're not hearing it yet because it's not routed back somewhere.
Got it.
Now I will go back to my routing, and then it would be my AFX out 1 and 2 right here. This is the ones that the process signal. So I can just right click and then I can label it. So I'm going to call it poly D left. And then put it here. Poly D right.
For anyone watching this, how do you label that? What's the key?
Double click on it.
Just double click? Okay, cool.
Double click it open. Yeah. And then you just kind of label it. So these are my AFX out channel 1 and 2, which is the process signal. Now that process signal, I want to be able to hear it. So I will send it to a headphone mix, which I know you explained that in your video. So I'll send it, let's say the artist is in mix 1.
Okay.
So I'll just grab it and I'll put it in mix 1.
Okay.
So that's mixer number 1. So if I go to mixer number 1, now we're going to have these 2 yellow ones. That's the poly D signal, the processed.
Yep.
But I also have right here my poly D dry.
Nice.
So I am muting this. Here you go. You can see there's both signal, and you can see one is way hotter because we cranked the compressor. And I get to mute 1 and monitor 1. And then same thing for recording. I will go to my DAW input, which here's my DAW input line. And then I will take my AFX. And then let's say I want to record it in channel 33 and 34. And my initial one, I already have it patched in channel 27 and 28. So right now in Pro Tools or Logic or whatever, if I select channel 27, 28, I'm recording the dry signal. And if I select channel 33 and 34, I will be recording the wet signal, or I can record both at the same time.
Love that. What's the example of if we use an AFX plugin or processor like an actual aux send, for instance, like a reverb or a delay? Is it the same workflow? You basically send to a reverb and then return it back to a separate channel, and they can just sort of blend it
Where's
in?
the reverb? Correct.
Okay.
You'll just basically, so like, I'm going to delete those right now. And if I want to add, I feel like I added a verb somewhere. Yeah, here it is. So your channel 15 and 16, I have a reverb already, a stereo verb added to it.
Okay.
And then you have your verb level. So you can turn it 100%. And then in this case, because you don't have a send, so this is kind of the part that is confusing. You don't have a send control. You have to send 100% of the dry signal at all time.
Right.
So at this point, you would do is you would turn that verb mix down. So the reverb mix, how much reverb is being applied.
Yep.
I would turn that up to, it's like, okay, here's how much verb I want, and then this is how I would mix the verb. And same if you have a delay, you would have a mix button on a delay, same thing. You would control how much mix, so which is the blend between the dry signal and the wet signal.
Got it. Now, another question here. This is all super helpful and practical, but I want to say the first time I used the reverb, I used it in Mixer 1. And what I did is I set up a mix in Mixer 1 for the vocalist. And it was, I mean, you know, a dry vocal, a click, and then the output 1 and 2 of my DAW, right? In Mixer 1, you actually have sends. And I believe they go straight to the reverb. Is that right?
Yes, but they don't go to the AFX verb. Mixer 1 have its own built-in reverb send.
Okay.
And then every channel you can just send verb to it, like up here. And then that verb will come out from the main stereo mix of Mixer 1.
Right.
The only thing about this is that only Mixer 1 that has that.
Yes.
When you have multiple singers recording at the same time, or a drummer and a singer, and the drummer wants different verb than the singer, then what I would do is I would use Mixer 1 for the singer, and then I would use the AFX for the drummer.
Or you just tell the drummer, calm down. You'll be all right without your reverb.
Yes.
Play the drums, buddy. No, that's cool. Okay, I just wanted to touch on that because I did that sort of by luck or accident or whatever, just on my first session using this, and it was really great. And the reverb sounds good too.
Yeah, it's a good reverb, yeah.
All right, is there any other noteworthy things about using the AFX?
Yes, actually, so a cool thing about the AFX for the Antelope is they don't use DSP chips, they use whatever the technology is, which the advantage of that, when I used to have multiple Apollo units, like I had 3 racks, and you have an insert, you can only tap into the DSP plugins on that insert associated with that one interface. And you can't grab DSP from the second interface and pull it into the first or the third. But because of the way that Apollo does, you kind of don't have limitation on this. So it's kind of really hard to run out of DSP, which is a thing that I used to run out of in Apollo a lot. So I don't like this because sometimes I have like a 30-track session, but on the first 8, I'm using tons of DSPs on the drums, and then the rest I'm not using, and then now I'm stuck.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's not, so which I really appreciate that.
So to clarify, with the Galaxy, you don't have that problem where the DSP is linked to the interface. Got it.
It will spread evenly because it's pulling from the whole thing at the same time. So you can have up to 8 inserts per channel, which is actually a really cool idea too. You can take a snare drum, send it to multiple AFX, and process each one different.
Yeah.
And then you would record all of them and make your decisions later if you wanted to. So I can take that snare drum, take it 5 times. One was hard EQ and compression, one was a different format of compression, and one was another thing, you know, and then you bring all these snares back into your DAW and then decide later. That's another thing you can do with the AFX you can't do with the other consoles.
Yeah. Okay, now I want to be super brief on this because I'm not an Atmos person, but and I don't think you're doing Atmos either, right? And your studio? Not yet. Okay, well, for those who are and are interested, you, with the Galaxy and probably the Orion 32s, maybe even
4.
Maybe others, I'm not sure. Definitely the 64. You have the ability to do the surround in the Atmos configurations. And the routing, theoretically, is pretty simple with the routing matrix. Digital Patch Babe really dumbs everything down and makes it pretty easy. But then there's also a couple other features for Atmos, correct?
Yes.
They have like EQing on the speakers. Is that right?
Correct.
You can do some EQ correction.
Room correction, basically.
Room correction.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And I would actually even separate those two into 2 separate points. Because the room correction that comes with the Atmos platform that they have, you can use it in your Atmos setup, but if you're not an Atmos user, you can still use that on your 2.1 or 2.0 speaker setup that you have, and that becomes a a room correction EQ. So you don't have to have an Atmos setup to tap into the room EQ. I think room EQ is still a genius thing that they have that works really well.
Great. That's fantastic. I'm never going to do that, but I think for those who love Atmos and want to hook up a lot of speakers, that would be very beneficial. Dude, thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely.
You're a genius. Go follow Fady on YouTube, because this man has helped me so much just make decisions that have helped my studio and interface routing. We got the Pharaohfish set up, and it's unbelievable. So again, go check it out. I'll link it down in the description. Thanks, Fady, for joining me, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
Thanks, Andrew.